Hello, everyone. My name is Jay Stilipec, and welcome to Grappling with Gender. We're going to be having a discussion about gender norms and variances in various media, as well as how writers and artists can try to incorporate different gender systems into their fiction writing. With me is Valerie Mikles. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Valerie Mikles. I work on weather satellites for NOAA during the day, and I write books, science fiction and queer science fiction. By night, I identify as agender, but I use she, her pronouns. And my most recent book is called The Chinali Virus. And this is the book that I was writing when I figured out that I didn't have a gender.
Okay, very cool. And we have Bill Laubenheimer. Go ahead, Bill.
Hi, my name is Bill Lauben. The name I'm known by in fandom is Bill Laubenheimer. I've got it in quotes because that's also the name I was running around with for many years when I believed I was a man. I found out differently. At this point, I'm identifying as genderqueer and non-binary and have pronouns to match, which I like to use when gender is relevant. Otherwise, they, them is fine.
Excellent. Thank you, Bill. And again, I'm Jay Stilipec. I am non-binary gender fluid. Meaning I kind of go back and forth between the two norms, but I do identify right down the middle. I am a retired Navy broadcast journalist and a current military broadcast journalism instructor. And I am the creator of Better Backstories, which is a card system for generating life histories for your characters, both in role-playing games and in fiction and even songwriting. So again, we're here to talk about gender. And as you can see, we all have our own different views on where we are in the gender spectrum, which I believe it is very much a spectrum. And I'm reminded of a movie that I recently rewatched called Hiding Out. And this was an 80s movie. John Cryer, he's this big time New York executive who sees a murder and then goes to hide out at his cousin's high school. And he pretends to be a student at the high school. And at one scene, he comes into like a science class. And again, this is the 80s. And the teacher was talking about gender or sexuality preferences as an arc, as a spectrum. He said, over here you have hetero, and over here you have homo. And we've all had thoughts at some point on this arch of the spectrum. And I was like, wow, for an 80s movie, that was very forward thinking. And it really kind of blew my mind. And again, the point of this thing is to talk about different gender systems in fiction. And can either of you think of another book other than one you've written, or a TV show or movie that had a non-typical binary gender system in it?
Well, the non-binary system gender, one of the things that comes to mind is Anne Leckie's Imperial Rauch Society. How do you assign a gender to somebody who has hundreds or even thousands of different bodies, and how does it relate, and how does it relate to anything that we know? And I think she handled it pretty well.
Okay, very interesting.
Well, one thing for me that was formative in my childhood was Star Trek: The Next Generation. There's an episode where they encounter a race that doesn't have gender. And I remember like, well, when you dance, who leads? And the answer was whoever's tallest. And I thought, I was like, that would change. So you think you could dance so much? And then one of the things that really frustrated me about that episode was one of the aliens identified as female, and she was seen as having some core essence of the human experience that the whole rest of the species was missing. And as someone who is both agender and asexual, it kind of made me grow up thinking I was missing some core element of the human experience. And so then I started identifying as an alien. Because that's just how I was always portrayed, was as the alien.
Oh, okay, because you stood out something different. That episode, I actually wrote it down, was called The Outcast.
Yeah.
It's from Star Trek: Next Generation, season 5, episode 17, and the race was called the Junai.
Yeah.
And it was a very simply shrouded parable for homosexuality in our system, because this woman, or this character, was forced to convert they put her through some system, some process that put her back into what they considered their gender norms. And it's interesting that in that show, all of the Junai characters were played by human women playing that character. So that and they had a gender neutral appearance to them, but they still were played by women in that one. Another system of gender neutral people was the movie Enemy Mine with Louis Gossett Jr. and Dennis Quaid. And in that one, the Drac, the aliens, were considered not to have male or female, to be not even hermaphroditic, but to be asexual. And just as Jerry, the alien, says in the movie, when the time comes, you just get pregnant and you have a child. Mind you, it was still a very human concept of pregnancy, that the fetus grows in the belly and, is born and such.
There was a Doctor Who episode where there was pregnant man, and it was the boys have the boys, the girls have the girls, and that's how that went there. And I just don't want to be pregnant.
It's not everybody, not every woman ascribes to that. I think society, a lot of the media that we view and that we entail, it convinces us that, you have to fall in love and you have to get married and you have to have children. And, every romantic comedy tends to end with either a wedding or pregnancy, or they already have children, and people get it in their head that that's normal. That's what I have to do. And I followed that path, for the first 40 years of my life. I finally met a woman, I got married, even though I didn't quite feel like I fit. And now that I've been able to identify as non-binary, gender fluid, asexual, I look back at the rest of my life and I'm like, that suddenly makes much more sense. That I was looking at women's magazines instead of women's fashion magazines instead of Playboy or Penthouse or anything like that. And if I was looking at a Playboy, I was looking at the cover to try to find the little hidden Playboy bunny that was somewhere on there. And it's funny when I tell people that and they decide, I didn't know there were hidden Playboy bunnies on the covers.
Yeah, it gets back all the way to the beginning. One of the things that I didn't mention in my first intro is that I've been grappling with gender since I was a kid, and I found out that there were things that were supposed to be boy things and things that were supposed to be girl things, and it was supposed to matter a whole lot, and I couldn't work any of that out.
Exactly. I think that's another thing is when you realize when you start writing the binary or going outside the binary, much as we have, you start to notice the different language, that certain jobs are very gendered or certain terms are very gendered, and even, pink and blue and the girls' toy section and the boys' toy section. And if a girl wants to buy a gun or get a Tonka truck, that's wrong. And if a boy wants to play with a doll or use makeup, that's wrong. I saw a great episode of, not Do You Want to Dance, but Britain's Got Talent. And this gentleman strolls out on stage and he's got a full beard and he's wearing these skinny jeans and everything. And he starts to sing rather poorly for, the first 30 seconds. And as soon as he got a buzzer, the music shifted and he dropped it like it was hot. And you realize he's wearing these 7-inch stiletto platform heels. And he started to twerk and dance like nobody's business. And he was just so impressed, and he moved on to the next level. And it just got me thinking, why can't a male dance like that, or wear heels or wear tights or wear a dress or wear makeup? It's considered not normal or not
Or it's
right.
considered drag too, because I've been getting very into RuPaul's Drag Race, and there's definitely a very big difference between a man in drag and a cross-dressing man and then a transgender person.
Yes.
I mean, it's a whole very big spectrum of differences, but it's insane to see these drag queens dance, because it's like they're doing splits and backflips and all of these amazing things that it's like you don't usually think about men dancing like that. And when you see them in drag dancing like that, I don't actually see them as men. Maybe other people do, but
Agreed. I think it really blurs your perceptions.
Yeah.
Just the way somebody stands can change your perception of them. Do they look confident? Do they look nervous? Do they look scared? And I think that ties into it as well.
And I think crossplay has become a thing, because like women have been cosplaying as men for ages because there were a lot of men characters. But when men start cosplaying as women, they have this term called crossplay. It's like, well, yeah, technically it's been going on for ages, and now we're trying to get this term associated with it. But, you know, it's like I learned a whole lot about what it means to put yourself in the body of someone else. Anyway.
Well, I started as a cross player,
Yeah.
and I'm a cosplayer. You know, 4 years ago when I started my transgender journey, and I was going to conventions with a friend, helping him out at his art table. And I said, hey, can I cosplay? And he said, sure. And I started looking up like Spider-Man costumes or whatever. And I realized, hey, I could do like a feminine Spider-Man. I wouldn't have to do anything with the makeup or a wig or anything. I'd just have a mask on. It'd be great. And then I stumbled on a costume for Zero Suit Samus, who I love, have loved Metroid for years. And I was like, I'm in. And right away I had to get a wig, and I had to figure out makeup, and I had to make a gun, and I had to get heels, and it was a whole big thing. But when I finally strutted into that convention center, you know, 6'4" and just totally statuesque and confident, it changed my life. You know, I knew that going to a convention in crossplay was a safe space to explore my femininity. And so many other cosplayers gravitated to me and congratulated me, encouraged me. And over the years, I have cosplay friends who have never seen me out of female cosplay. So when they do see me at a convention out of cosplay, or when I'm mask presenting, they're just kind of like, something's missing, Jay. And
but I love that there's a place in fandom for this to exist and to be explored, and then you as an individual can decide whether you're committing to that or whether it's just for fun. And but the safety of it is very important.
oh yes, and I've been very fortunate to have very few negative situations either at conventions or at my workplace. Again, I was able to, through cosplay, I was able to realize that I liked going back and forth. I didn't just want to always be feminine. I didn't just always want to be masculine. And then I went to work and said, I want to be Mix instead of Mr. And I want to be able to wear a dress with heels or, you know, flats and a tie. And they were like, as long as you show up and do the job, and we don't care. And day one with my new students, I'm always like, I'm Mix J Stilipec, sometimes sir, sometimes ma'am. You should be able to tell the difference. Use whatever pronoun falls out of your face. You won't hurt my feelings. And they get it from day one. All right, so we have some questions starting to pop up. The first one is, what do you all think of the Voyager episode Tuvix? Now, I just want to, for anybody who's not aware of this episode, this is one where there was a transporter accident and Tuvok and Neelix were fused together into a single being. And it affected, you know, there were, again, completely different personality, completely different belief system, so to speak. And I don't remember specifically how that related to gender, but I do remember it was an interesting view on the mating of, you know, it was basically, he was the child of.
It was less about the gender and more about the emergence of a new person and the morality of separating them back and the rights of the two individuals that versus the new creation.
Right.
So I don't really see how that relates in a gender way, but I think from a storytelling point of view, if you were to fanfic the hell out of this and then assume that the Talaxian and the Vulcan anatomy are not actually similar in any way, you could definitely do some interesting things with new genders emerging, because there's nothing that says just because they're both identified as male in a Star Trek universe that they are actually the same in their different species. So you could actually do a lot with that.
I could see it also being as a way of two homosexual characters, you know, having their genetics fused in a way different from the traditional methods. You know, instead of two lesbians having to find a sperm donor, they could fuse, you know, create an egg, an embryo of their actual genetic material and create a child. So I could see that as being a benefit in the long run.
And there is active science towards that as well. So,
Bill, any thoughts?
Not really on that so much. I'd say sort of biding my time right now. I'm not that familiar with the episode, but yeah, there's. I'd rather save my thoughts for some other stuff right now.
No problem at all. All right, so let's move on. Thank you for that question. I'm sorry, I just cleared it and I forgot to see who it was. This one is from Kate and says, in which fictional universes do you see the most progress when it comes to embracing gender inclusivity? I'm gonna have to defer to someone else on this one.
I don't actually know, but you should definitely look towards the newer fiction and don't be afraid to embrace the new and gender queer authors, because I'm part of a website called Queer Sci-Fi, and they mostly started with romance, but they've branched out to all sorts of queer sci-fi. And so there is a growing community of people that are actively trying to write queer stories. So in terms of established universes that everybody would recognize, I don't know. I mean, I don't even think Doctor Who is doing it particularly well. They're like, yay, we have a female doctor. And it's like, yeah, you kind of missed the mark in that.
And you immediately gave her two male companions.
Yeah.
Nice job. Yeah. I just started recently watching She-Ra on Netflix, and people have said that it's super queer, super gay, and I haven't quite gotten there yet. I can see gender's just not an issue. Even She-Ra herself has a very agender kind of appearance. It's like from certain angles, she has masculine features and concepts. She's not over femininely sexualized in a feminine manner, and I can appreciate that. And Steven Universe, which I only know of passingly, but it has very connective, queer friendly storylines and characters.
Is it Becky Chambers? Because I haven't read her books, but I've heard that she has some queer characters and non-binary representation in her books. And then, yeah, I wish I had read her books, but
it's hard to know.
But it's going to be in a lot of the newer fiction. It's going to be done well, and it's going to be done right in the newer fiction. And I would leave it to the Balticon readers to please leave reviews and help us find those, because it's hard.
Agreed. Bill, any thoughts on, again, a universe that's doing really well with inclusivity?
I got a couple of thoughts here. One thing that particularly comes to mind, well, first off, generically, anything you can find by a non-cis author of some sort has a much better chance of being able to gender right than anything done by a cisgender person. It's just most cisgender people have not had the opportunity to sit down and actually think gender, because it's just they know things are right for them. People who do it right, I would definitely point people at Charles Stross, who has an incredible range of gender and sexuality in all of his works. In fact, one very interesting thing he did was in what he calls his Scottish Singularity series, where he wrote a lesbian detective story, Rule 34, where the lead character, yeah, she's lesbian, but it doesn't enter into the story, and it's just one of the things that is, and that's something that's really done right. For something a little bit more interesting and out there, there is a poet working in Central Illinois, Elizabeth Barrett, who is doing a whole variety of crowdfunded stuff. I'll be sure to put the link up in the chat somewhere along the way. And by design, they literally just cover any possibility of gender and sexuality. And you'll read through some of the stuff they've got. You'll probably find someone who looks like you, no matter who you are. I'll make sure to put that into chat in just a moment here for everybody to take a look at.
That's
Elizabeth
good.
Barrett and Charles Stross were the...
Yeah.
So Baden here, go ahead, Bill.
Any non-cis author has a real good chance of having at least some better insight, because they've had to deal with things that most people haven't.
Agreed. Yeah, definitely non-cis is the way to go.
Not all of us check a box when we post things to Amazon with the tag saying author's sexuality or gender.
It's true. That's the unfortunate side, is that it's not a common hashtag, that this book, this sci-fi book, has an alternative gender system, or it has a progressive gender system. So it's really kind of hit or miss, I think. So Baden said, I find podcasts are more gender variant than other forms of media. A good one I just got into is the Penumbra Tom. podcast, and Rusty Quill Gaming has some good ones as well. Thank you, Baden. I appreciate that information.
The Double Clicks are coming out with a musical called Teaching a Robot to Love, and the lead singer of the band recently came out as non-binary, and so they wrote a musical, and it uses the robot non-binary trope, but I think it's going to be a very clever musical, and most of their stuff is very heartfelt. So
Well, that's good.
from a music perspective, if you're looking for some non-binary positivity, the Double Clicks.
Cool. So I've only recently heard of this particular book and its variant gender issues, but Le Guin's Left Hand of Darkness. Have either of you read it? What's your take on it?
I have not read it.
Are you more familiar with it than I am?
No, I feel terribly unwell read right now.
Yeah, I hear you. Bill, are you familiar with Left Hand of Darkness?
Yeah, it's one of those works that's judged very seminal, but on the other hand, it's also wedded to the binary in ways that haven't aged as well as it might have, but it's still worth reading. And once again, it's got the same idea that if you don't know what you're coming out, you actually have a gender while you're in a neutral state.
Okay, and that's good. That's a good angle, I suppose, to have. All right, moving on to the next question from Alan. What fantasy sci-fi gender full spectrum presented stories, that was a mouthful, would be good for children, teens, and young adults? Which ones would be acceptable in more liberal, accepting conservative school and library systems? If either of you have answers for this, I have to go to the interwebs real quick and find one particular answer. So Valerie, do you have an answer?
No, I don't talk to children. No, that is an excellent question.
Okay.
Does anybody in the chat have anything to recommend?
Or Bill, do you have anything?
Not right now, thanks. Sorry.
Okay.
There are some good things on there. Actually, one source that might be worth considering is there's a webcomic written by a trans woman in Montreal, Assigned Male Comics. I think it was assignedmail.tumblr.com for a while, and then after that, I'm not sure if it went. But if you look for Sophie LaBelle and Assigned Male, you'll find some interesting things on there. And she focuses very much on the trans experience as it affects the tweens and teens. Once again, has a very gender diverse cast. Well worth your time.
Well, that's okay. Very cool. Not quite so young adult, but I can recommend a webcomic called Menage 3. Actually, Pixie Tricks Comics it is the successor to that, and it's got a lot of not binary, bisexual, lesbian, gay, non-binary, gender fluid characters that are all interacting in a comic strip kind of thing. So that's and it's very nerdy as well. So I can recommend that. But this other one is a Kickstarter that I followed or supported, which is called Raven Wild, and it's by a gentleman named Adam Reynolds, and it's a series of books that have transgender visibility and acceptance throughout its very inclusive storytelling. So Raven Wild on Kickstarter. I think you can sign up to their mailing list to purchase the book once it becomes available. It's not quite out yet, and there are several different books in the same universe. So a lot of gender inclusivity there.
I've also come across some pointers that I don't happen to have in front of me right now for children's books explaining how not everybody is a boy or a girl. And they're out there if you can find them. I'm not sure exactly where you find them right now.
Right. One thing that really helped my mother to grasp what I was going through, even though it's from a slightly different angle, but the TV show I Am Jazz, and she did a book when she was younger about her transgender story and everything like that. That was, I'm pretty sure, was targeted towards younger children. So yeah, the whole I Am Jazz books and TV show I would highly recommend, because I think in the TV show when it starts out she's like 13 or 14, just starting high school, and now it's gone on to her 18, 19 years old and starting college. So I highly recommend that. A lot of good suggestions coming up in the chat. Lynn Fueling Generic Fantasy, also I Wish You All the Best by Mason Deaver, a young adult non-binary novel, and the Night Runner series. So thank you for those suggestions. So here's another one, another question in the chat from Mary. Thoughts on the Orville episode about a girl? I have seen the Orville once all the way through, and this episode isn't jumping out at me, so I apologize for that. Is anybody else familiar with that episode?
Yeah, I am. We were watching the Orville until it beamed off to Planet Hulu, and it got delayed by a considerable amount. It was, you know, they were obviously focusing on, or trying to at least bring up transgender issues in dealing with it, in that they created a race that was supposed to be very masculine, sort of their Klingon equivalent, if you will. One of the things to remember about the Orville is that Sean McDonough is a real Trek fanboy.
Yes.
It shows.
I see Orville as the spiritual successor to Star Trek fully.
Yeah.
But now, okay, now we remember what you're talking about.
Where no one has gone before. And
Star Trek with sex and drink and drugs. So
once again, that I think that gets hung up in a lot of things that one could sort of lay in as a cis view of gender variance, and seems somewhat problematic because of that.
Right. I remember now that Bortus's race is, you know, they all, I guess you said, all masculine, and they have but sometimes their children are born female, and they go through a procedure, and there was a lot of anger and back and forths about whether that was the right choice. And now I remember. I don't remember the episode specifically. I know it came up in several different episodes as their child has grown up on the ship.
Which kind of brings up the intersex question in terms of gender identity and intersex minorities, because there is a lot of information about how, like, early childhood gender reassignments for intersex people have been very damaging. But then when you try to imagine the future, it's like, okay, I want to have an intersex character in the future, but I don't ever want to discuss their genitals. So how do I get that out of headcanon without making a big deal out of it? And so, you know, there's a lot of questions about how do you include that in a future setting where in the future this isn't supposed to be an issue. You know, when does it come up? How does it come up? Where does it come up? Because really, it's nobody's business. And you know.
Yeah, well, I've got a line like that is, you're not the doctor who's responsible for that, and you're not someone I'm interested in having sex with. And by saying that, you just disqualified yourself for both positions.
Yeah. There's a comic that I remember seeing where it was like, it's got, you know, a boy and a girl are babies, and the person's like, okay, so you're a boy and you're a girl, and then shows them dressed up in pink and blue and says, okay, you have to wear these colors and these particular types of fashions because every time people look at you, they need to know what's between your legs. And the boy and the girl are just like, why?
Yeah.
Because and when you think about it, you know, there's this crazy connection with the gender of, you know, so like you see a baby in a pram, and one of the first questions is it a boy or a girl? Or even before they're born, is it a boy or a girl? Why do people have to put such focus on that? And I've seen how it can damage parents' perceptions of their child, you know, expecting a boy and then getting a girl. And that's often a thing in some stories. Oh, my parents thought I was going to be a boy, so now I have a boy's name. Or they thought I was going to be a girl, and then they had a boy, and the boy is the cherished one in the family. You know, so you do see a lot of that in storytelling.
Some of that is culturally driven, for sure.
Yeah, and it's essentially, how can you have a culture where people have different rights and privileges and responsibilities if you can't distinguish between them in some way? And so all of that crud has grown up around what just started out as okay. People are different. I mean, my own theory about why we have boy things and girl things is that no matter what trait you're looking at, people cluster. And if that lines up with their sexual dimorphism, they get assigned to the one that's there, even though all the research has shown there's a lot more overlap.
Yeah.
Oh, I agree. There's a great image that I love. I'll put it in the chat later, but it shows what people think sexuality is, and it shows a bunch of black monsters with 2 eyes and 3 horns, and then a bunch of white monsters with 1 eye and 2 horns. And then it has another picture next to it that says what sexuality actually is, and all the monsters are various shades of gray. Some with 5 horns, some with no horns, some with 5 eyes, some with 1 eye, some with 2 eyes. Just all different heights and weights and stuff. And it's like, yeah, everybody is very diverse. It's like fingerprints. Yes, there are some standards, but not everybody is exactly the same. And we're finally getting to that point where we can communicate enough to realize that we don't have to be homogenized together for the sake of society, where all the like people have to be together and we have to continue like this. Now we can start to express ourselves and still function as a society. Only a lot of people find that really off because, well, they don't identify, they're cisgender, they don't identify as anything outside of what's expected. And it's like, well, that's fine. You can be that. No one's telling you you can't. We're not trying to destroy your gender. We're just trying to get you to accept ours.
That's a great point. And yeah, and even within cisgender things, you have a tremendous variety. I mean, you get into things like, okay, if this is what men do. They smoke, they drink, they fight,
they cook outdoors,
firearms, they stick bodily organs into places they were not designed to go, and they think Jackass is funny. And I'm 0 for 6 on that myself, and I don't know how many people are lining that up. And you could be 0 for 6 and still be a man. It's just, right. I recognize that I'm not.
I have a friend, her child just came out as transgender and finally identifying as a girl, and has finally accepted her name. And the mother and the father are both Southern. And there's been a bit of a struggle with that. And the child is about 16. And they've been struggling with that realization. And in some ways, they're like, the father feels like, where did I go wrong? And it's not so much, where did I go wrong that my child starts to feel this way, but I gave this child everything that they wanted, everything that they needed. They were my life, and they're still unhappy. Mm-hmm. So he feels in that sense he failed. The mother, she feels really kind of a weird place because she had, up until very recently, she had 2 boys. And now she has, a girl, and she doesn't, though she's a mother and she cooks and she cleans and she does the whole housewife thing, she's admitted to me that she's not into painting her nails, doing her hair, going shopping for dresses, these types of things that are expected of a woman and a mother. And I'm like, no, you can not do that. If you want me to take her shopping for dresses, once we can, I'm more than happy. But then again, she feels like, what am I doing wrong? I failed my child in some way. And it's very eye-opening to see them going through those, wrestling with those difficulties.
Yeah, and it's a big problem because I think we've all been saying that we grew up some flavor of cis, and we never got the experience of the things that were not our presumed gender.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Some of us have to try and catch up for that.
Well, there's not really another gender that I'm trying to be, which is another confusing thing. But it was always confusing for me to be a woman in science and not feel like I understood what other women in science were going through. It's like, I understand it. And I wasn't quite sure if that was because other women were trying to have families and children. So there was something tied to my asexuality that was playing into me not feeling that, or if it was something more fundamental, because there's that song, Man, I Feel Like a Woman. And I was like, is it really just coloring your hair, doing what you dare, or is it something that's innate in you? And sometimes it's hard to imagine that feeling from the outside, but that's why we have movies and literature that exemplify this, is so that we can think about that other side, and we can begin to imagine. And the stronger the author is in capturing that, and the more honest they are, the better that we can understand what other people are going through. Because even between the 3 of us, we all have very different experiences, but we fall under the same umbrella.
Right. And I think it's important to remember, as you say, we can imagine things first, is anything that is factual in our life, that we consider to be facts or things that have been proven had to be imagined by someone first. And Einstein said that imagination is more important than knowledge because while knowledge is finite and can only go so far, imagination is infinite. And and everything, you have to imagine something that doesn't exist before you can make it into reality or prove that it exists. Lisa in the comment or in the chat said that I feel we lack the right words to describe ourselves and our relations to gender. I would agree with that. I think that we are at a point in our society where people are starting to wrestle with these feelings. Since I came out, I have encountered many people who have questioned me and asked me, how did I feel this? I had a student right after I introduced myself, and she was like, Stilipec, how do you decide which gender you want to be each day? And I said, well, it's a very complex system based on how late I sleep in. which was a joke about makeup and dressing and stuff like that. And I've gotten better at that. I've gotten quicker. But again, I look back at my life and I was always drawn towards feminine things. I can remember thinking in my teens, wow, women have all the best clothes, and I was always drawn towards that, and it's not that I hated being a man. I didn't have serious gender dysphoria, and I don't. I have friends, trans women friends who can't even shower with the light on because of how affected they are by their own body. And luckily I don't have that. But still finding the right word that made sense to me, gender fluid, non-binary. I went through agender. I went through neutrois, through two-spirit and all these other words that exist in different cultures and are slowly, and these words didn't exist at all 25 years ago when I was first having these feelings. And I remember coming out to my mother.
That was a really big problem for me too.
I remember coming out to my mother as a cross-dresser, and she was just like, okay. She had no idea what to do with that. She had nowhere to direct me. And there was no TV shows. Any TV show in that era, Tootsie, Bosom Buddies, Mrs. Doubtfire, these were all comedies. Mm-hmm. They were always played for jokes. And speaking of drag queens and the difference between cross-dressers, drag queens, and transsexuals, I think Wesley Snipes summed it up very well in Tu Wong Fu, where he said that a transvestite is a man who puts on women's clothes to get his sexual kicks, and a transsexual is somebody who goes to Sweden to get the little surgery, and a drag queen is when a gay man has way too much fashion sense for one gender.
Except how many drag queens are straight, you'd be surprised.
Agreed. Because it's performance. And I went through that as well when I was trying to figure out what do I want to do? I'm not a drag queen because I'm not gay, but am I a female impersonator? Through cosplay, is this something that I only feel comfortable doing or want to do? Would I be okay just doing it on weekends? Or is it something I want to do every day? And when I started having panic attacks about taking off my breast forms and not wanting to take them off, I realized, no, this is something I need to have in my life every day.
I'm part of a top surgery group, top surgery support group. And a lot of us, when we start down that road, we have a lot of questions, we have a lot of doubts. And then we also get into this imposter syndrome. It's like, what if I'm not actually this gender? Mm-hmm. And I always tell people, like, well, cis people don't wake up every morning, pull out their gender meter to see if they still feel cis enough to dress cis that day. Agreed. And
that just sounds so much like me.
I love it.
That's really just the advice I give is like, you don't have to do a daily tap to see if you're still trans. It's a time average thing.
Right, and, exactly. Because we all, everybody's moods change from one day to the next based on a lot of different factors. I've had days when I was very tired and very sad and very emotional. I've had other days I feel great and I'm just wonderful. And they're side by side. And it's like, why is that? And nobody really knows. So we got about 10 minutes left and I want to rapid fire. We've got a lot a questions on here.
Yeah, so I've got one that I really wanted to get to.
Okay, Bill, we'll try.
Liza Kennet's mentioned how does one write a non-binary character as a cisgender heterosexual author, and without not cloning one of their non-binary friends? And the answer I've got is, well, talking to your non-binary friends is a really great place to start, because if you want to understand a particular gender, you really want to talk to the people that are going that have that gender, regardless of what you're doing. And one of the examples that I always like to go to there is the Hijras in India. If you listen to what the privileged classes in India are saying, you think, oh, we take care of them really great. We invite them to officiate at our weddings and things like that. if you talk to the hijras, they're saying, well, we get a chance to do that every so often, but most of the time our career choices are beggar or sex work.
Sure.
And it's okay to clone your friends. Just don't clone the same friend for every non-binary character in your book, because every person has a different story. And so if you talk to 4 of your non-binary friends, you combine them to make one character, take different aspects of them to make another character, and then remember that they're still whole people. They have hobbies and passions, and some play music, and some, you know, hate the banjo, and you know, like it's only a small part of them. The gender identity is a small part, and as a writer, you want to approach them as a whole person, but it is okay to use a friend as a jumping off point. So
I think it's important that I think we see that a lot of shows where they have that token gay character or that token transgender character, only to kill them off quickly or things like that. But when their gender identity is the whole character, you know, that's all there. They're just the gay one. You know, it's like, no, you're right. They have a whole life and they have interests. And why can't they also be, you know, play in the symphony and do this? Why can't you have a dude bro who likes monster trucks and whatever, but is also gay? You know, but people don't do that. They want to stick with the stereotype because they're comfortable with it.
And in a similar vein, don't focus exclusively on the gender. There are a lot of people who do that. It's like everything about the character is about the gender, as opposed to everything about the things about the character being about the character. And oh, by the way, so for example, take your non-binary person, have them talk with a friend who wants to set them up with somebody who they think matches their presumed gender and sexuality, but in reality, this is a non-binary person. So it's a scene that could happen to anybody, but they're being set up wrong, and that creates a whole different spin on the story than trying to continually obsess over how this non-binary person is going to react to this situation.
Right.
I find most of the time in the world, my gender doesn't enter into things, and that's why I got they them down on the bottom, because if gender isn't relevant, we have a cultural history of plugging in way too often and ask people to walk around revealing their role in the sexual equation and their fertility and all of those things, and that's where a lot of the trappings of masculinity and femininity come from.
Right.
Yeah, I was raised as a cishet conservative homophobe, and so I've definitely come a long way from there. But when I was writing book 2 of my series many years ago, I had a gay character in there, and my biggest fear was that having a gay character, I would lose my entire family because of the homophobia. And so I thought, well, maybe I could make him straight. And when I started trying to write him that way, every scene became about proving his sexuality. And then I lost everything else about him. And it's like, well, if I just let him be gay, then he's just like a very smart engineer. He loves his mother. He fights for his friends. He wants what's best for his family. And there's just like all these other aspects of him that he was free to be when I let him be, when I wasn't obsessing over that one aspect of his sexuality.
Agreed.
And so it's nice to include the gender identity and sexuality, but it is not the whole character. And let your characters tell you who they are.
Agreed.
If you're the kind of author whose characters talk to them.
All right, so moving on to another question. Bill, you want to answer this one from Melissa? What are some gender stereotypes and cliches that writers should avoid? Go ahead, Bill.
Right. Essentially, anything that comes with real men or real women attached is going on. I mean, you take a look, for example, you know, just one thing that strikes me is there's so much stuff in our culture that comes up with for women or for men. You know, you have body wash, and then you have body wash for men, and that apparently sells. So that sort of thing. And I was talking about earlier about how you can just run down any checklist of things that are supposedly masculine or feminine, and that's a great place to start. As I was saying earlier, traits cluster. The clusters have people of all sorts of different body shapes and crotch geometry in them, and if you want to avoid stereotypes, drop somebody in there who doesn't match up.
Well, I think another option is what I call the gender flip test. And it's like if you write a character and you're feeling maybe that they're kind of, being overly feminist or overly misogynist or whatever, just flip their gender. Can the whole story have minimal changes? Like you were saying, Valerie, you had to significantly make changes to the character just because you changed their sexuality. But if you can make a male character female and it's okay, everything about that character is still works. And I'm not saying, because it basically implies that women can be horn dogs, or women can be bad friends, women can be emotionless. These are sometimes traits that are ascribed to men. And a man can be emotional, a man can be a cook, a man can be a loving parent, a man, so I think it's more important that we realize that we need to be able to flip the script in that respect.
Just as a writing exercise, I would always recommend flipping a point of view and doing a gender flip of a character for a scene, just to see if something more awesome comes out of it. But,
agreed.
It depends on your writing style if you're a discovery writer. So.
Right. So I want to just, I think since we're down to like about the last 2-3 minutes, I'm very sorry we didn't get to these last couple of questions from Alan and Jonathan, but we will be in the Discord chat immediately following this. I think we decided we'll be in the writers chat,
writing.
the literary writing chat, so we can jump in there and discuss this at length for hours if we like. I also want to remind everybody of the GoFundMe page for Balticon. If you like what you're seeing, like what you're experiencing, then please drop a few bucks and help us continue to support our writer-fed community. I will also go around the room and let my lovely panelists plug their products. Go ahead, Valerie.
Hi, I'm Valerie. This is my new book. It's called The Chinali Virus, and my print copy says not for resale because the pandemic shut down the printing warehouse. Ooh. But you can get a print copy if you like. I just, would recommend the ebook. It features an entire society where people default to gender neutral pronouns until they declare otherwise. But it's also just a sci-fi adventure quest and featuring an asexual aromantic character. I also have some straight hard sci-fi. This is my New Dawn series. And I'm working on new covers. So if you don't see a cover like this, then it's still me. But that's a spaceship going around. It's kind of Firefly meets Stargate meets Jericho.
Oh, I'm in.
And definitely look for science fiction, like queer sci-fi online. So
awesome. Thank you, Valerie. Bill, do you have anything to plug, or at least your social
medias?
I don't
have anything to plug for myself. Anybody who's looking for me in the post-discussion thought, look for NG Moonmoth. That's my non-binary handle. But I've already been plugging most of my friends already, or people appropriate when I was talking about Sophie Liddell and Charles Strauss and Elizabeth Barrett. I'd also like to put a shout out for gender issues in general to somebody I'm really, a couple people I'm really interested in there. One person you'll find who's writing from a lesbian perspective but covers a lot of things, particularly historical, is Heather Rose Jones. She's HRJ on Dreamwidth and Live Journal. I think still Live Journal as well, although most of the action has moved over to Dreamwidth at this point.
We lost your audio there, Bill. I'm sorry, but your audio just cut out. There you go. No. Bill, your audio is cutting in and out. We can't hear you anymore.
Okay, yeah. Is this better? I may be just holding the tablet funny.
Yeah, I think you were holding it funny, but we've actually run out of time. So
okay,
any other suggestions?
I'll post the other I'll get the other person lined up and I'll post it in the after panel.
In the after panel. Awesome. Thank you very much. And once again, I am Jay Stilipec, the creator of Better Backstories. If you want to create better life histories for your fantasy characters, sci-fi characters, modern day characters, noir characters, historical characters, any character at all for role-playing games and writing, you can follow us on betterbackstories.com, on Kickstarter, on Facebook, and on Instagram, or you can contact me directly and I can get you a digital print it yourself copy right away for only $12. And I will see everybody in the Discord chat. Thank you very much for such a wonderful panel, everyone.